Well, the markets are sharply reacting to a looming trade war with China, Mexico, and Canada as tariffs on our largest ag trade partners will take effect tomorrow. The White House says the tariffs include 10% on all imports from China, as well as 25% on Mexico and Canada. Energy imports from Canada would be taxed at 10%. Canada has said it will retaliate with tariffs targeting more than $100 billion in U.S. goods. Mexico is set to release a list today, which is expected to include agriculture goods. We've got a panel of familiar faces joining us this morning, including Tommy Grisafi and Chris Swift. And Tommy, I'm going to start with you. I understand you were staying up late last night trying to kind of make sense of all this uncertainty. Maybe tell us how the markets did respond. What are you going to be looking at? Sure.
So as far as futures trading, the one group of futures opens at 5 o'clock. That'd be your outside markets, your all your stock indices, your metals, your energies. And then we have our next group is the grains that open at 7. Now, meats haven't opened yet, but they definitely reacted. Within the first hour last night, we watched gold trade up $30, down $30. Big moves in the stock market. The S&P and the NASDAQ took it the worst. NASDAQ, within seconds of opening, traded down 600, which is a big move. Now, one of the things I was saying before we started was you have to watch markets in percents. You have to understand that we are not trading Dow 5,000, or when I was a kid at the Board of Trade, we literally had hats that said Dow 10,000. We're Dow 40,000. So if we pull down 1,000, it's not the end of the world. I don't think there's a single person out there today who should be worried about the retirement, unless you're retiring maybe today. But with that, we're going to move forward, and it's just volatility. Now, from a trader standpoint, I love it. I mean, that's very selfish, but I love the price action. It was a wonderful month. You know, I moved down here. I'm with Nesvick Trading, and January was a crazy month in all markets, especially what this guy does over there.
Yeah, speaking of, Chris, I mean, let's talk about cattle.
Sure.
At this point, how is the cattle industry? You know, you and I were talking before we went to camera, that more of an issue right now is that the Mexico border is open. We're bringing cattle back in. Of course, the screwworm, not an issue apparently. It's been cleared. That right now more of an issue than everything going on as far as these tariffs?
Well, we have some conflicting things. We have consumer demand. That's the biggest thing we've noticed is resilience has continued on. I'm not real sure that the 25% is going to have much impact just right off the bat coming across the border, because we do need those cattle severely. They are discounted severely to what U.S. cattle are. So right off the bat, I don't think it'll make much difference to it. Again, with the inventory report that we saw on Friday, it was not quite as low as what we thought it was going to be, 1.5% to 2% lower. It came out at 1%. So again, some conflicting things, and we wonder in this new bout of inflation, if the tariffs do create more inflation, does beef and cattle appreciate with that, or are they finally detrimented by?
What should producers be looking for right now at this point?
You know, right now they're probably still going to be looking at input costs. Feed cost, oil again higher, sharply higher this morning. The price of cattle is very volatile, and they are looking at having to pay tip-top prices as of Friday. They continue are. So I think that with nothing really to do there, if you're going to stay in the cattle business, these are the prices we're trading at, is watch those input prices.
You guys are going to stick around right now. Before we check in on things in Canada, we're hearing from U.S. ag officials on these tariffs. House Ag Committee Chair G.T. Thompson released a statement backing the move, saying in part President Trump's tariff policy has been an effective tool in leveling the global playing field and ensuring fair trade for American producers. Look no further than Colombia's about-face on accepting repatriated criminal migrants at the mere threat of tariffs. Farm Bureau President Zippy Duvall, more cautious, warning farmers could pay a price for additional tariffs. And he says, in part, we urge your administration to make certain that any action taken in the near or long term with Canada, Mexico, and China does not make it more difficult for American farm families to raise a safe and affordable crop on domestic soil. We now move to Alberta, Canada, where we have Shaun Haney from Real Ag Radio joining us this morning. Good morning, Shaun. Thank you so much for being here. How are Canadian officials responding this morning? Walk us through the last couple of days.
It's been a very up and down last couple of days, I would say, and thanks a lot for having me here this morning. We heard Prime Minister Trudeau on Saturday night address not only Canadians, but also Americans as well. Talked about the history of the relationship, going back to the, even the early 1900s in World War I and II. And then we heard yesterday conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre kind of had the same narrative, the same thoughts in terms of length of relationship and how disheartened. And I would say a good way to describe a lot of reaction from Canadians is a feeling kind of a betrayal, that Canada is being somehow lumped in with the likes of China as somehow a trade enemy. And I think what's got people the most up, I guess, the hair on the back of their neck up a little bit is the fact that fentanyl has, as an example, has been used as one of the main leverage points here. The numbers just don't speak to it. Is there fentanyl crossing the Canadian border into the U.S.? Well, of course there is. To have zero would be a near impossibility. Only 1% of whether it's illegal migrants or illegal fentanyl that crosses into the U.S. comes through the Canadian border in comparison to Mexico. The issues with Mexico on these two files is not the same as Canada. The Canadian government has already promised to put $1.3 billion of increased money into border security. I see the Black Hawk helicopters flying over my place in Lethbridge, so action has already been taken. So I would say betrayal is a good way to put it.
At this point, I mean, if I know that, Trump is meeting with Canada today at this point, making those efforts. If the border, was locked down, if fentanyl was not crossing anymore, if there was, and you said 0%, probably nearly impossible. At this point, do you think that these tariffs could be put at bay at right now?
Well, I think that's kind of lies on the White House at this point. Canada has said that they will retaliate, even though President Trump had stiffly said that, hey, if Canada and Mexico retaliate, he's going to increase the tariffs even more. So essentially, Mexico and Canada, I guess, are calling him on that bluff. We'll have to see what comes out of that meeting today, whether we're talking about reduced tariffs because we're going to renegotiate USMCA, or we're going to be looking at even higher tariffs. Canada's going to be putting in, as of tomorrow, I think it's $21 billion in 25% tariff on $22 billion of product. That's going to increase to upwards of $150 billion in 21 days from now. Some of the things are on this initial list. We're going to see increased tariffs on U.S. wheat, durum wheat, barley, oats, canola, sunflower seed, live poultry, eggs, tomatoes, beans, Florida orange juice, coffee and tea. Just some examples of some of the things they're going to face a tariff. It's going to be a cost to Canadians as well. There's some hurt here in the short term.
And Tommy, I'll bring you in on this. I mean, looking at the impact that this is going to have on both sides. One thing we do know, 10% tariff on energy. Good news for consumers. And maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. And I think Shaun could confirm Canada did say they're still going to allow us to import ethanol to Canada. That could help soften the blow. I guess my biggest concern is the auto industry. I mean, the amount of parts that go back and forth over the border, just incredible. And so the pain to Canada, if this goes on for several weeks, I imagine you'd see immediate layoffs on the border, because as a company, there's only one way to start to prepare for this. Now, my gut says I don't think we'll go that far, but you have to be prepared, right? You just can't sit there and say, I didn't know this could happen. That's what makes risk management. That's what we do, right? Mm-hmm. Is these days when someone says, oh, I didn't know that could happen. That's what we're always telling people. But in the sense, if you're Canadian, you woke up today and you probably do feel like a victim, to Shaun's point.
Yeah, but we also can't have the victim mentality, right? You got to get over it and also see, how are we going to go forward here? I believe that ethanol will be on the next list in that 21 days. 30% of U.S. ethanol is exported to Canada. It's over $1 billion a year. It is a really good way to hit back on the U.S. Midwest and hear from U.S. farmers pushing the White House to change the mindset here. Also look at potash as an example. Now, the U.S. fertilizer industry was out over the weekend saying, please give an exemption. Senator Grassley saw a tweet or a post this morning on X saying that he believes, pleading with the White House to have an exemption on potash. 87% of the potash that is used in the U.S. Midwest comes from Saskatchewan, Canada. You can relocate an auto plant. You cannot relocate a potash mine. There are only a couple places in the world to get the quality and the supply of potash that Canada provides. It's Canada or it's Russia, Belarus. So you take your pick on where you're going to get your potash from.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Shaun, as always, for joining us. Shaun Haney with Real Ag Radio. And Tommy, to your point, too, great to point out the auto industry. There are auto parts that cross borders multiple times before the final product. And we're looking at a hit not only to the auto industry, but also to companies like Deere and Company. I mean, these guys are going to take a hit, and that's going to be passed down to the consumer. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Tommy Grisafi with Nesvick Trading, as well as Chris Swift from Swift Trading here in Nashville. Always a pleasure to have you both join us.
Thank you,
guys. Good morning to you as well.